I'm Deirdre. I'm the chair of Chronic Pain Ireland. I live with chronic pain myself, and I'm a psychotherapist in my own life, working towards pre-accreditation. So we're here today discussing the benefits of clinical trials, and we have Alison here, who's a patient, a young woman living with chronic regional pain syndrome, complex regional pain syndrome, even if I got the name right. Sorry, Alison.
No
And
problem.
Maya, who's the co-founder and CEO of FindMeCure. And the ladies are going to discuss what is a clinical trial, first of all, and what are the benefits, how you can access the trials. And then Alison is just going to share her personal experience of what it was like to participate and what happened afterwards. So anybody who's listening in, if you can hold your questions towards the end, and then I will host a question section at the end and direct your questions to the speaker you would like an answer for. And that way we're not all talking over each other. So briefly, I'm just going to explain a little bit about what Pain Awareness Month is, and then I'm going to hand you over to Maya. So as I say, I'm from Chronic Pain. We're based here in Ireland. I'm calling in from Dublin. And Pain Awareness Month is an international event arranged by the American Pain Association, the International Alliance of Patient Organisations, and ourselves, Chronic Pain Ireland. And we all have events throughout the month aiming to raise awareness of chronic pain, and to deepen understanding. Because many people living with chronic pain, it can be invisible. In that, as I say, I live with pain myself, and often people tell me I look quite well. So for the person living with the pain, it can be really heartening to, to hear other people speaking about pain, but also it's a chance for their family, for relatives to hear that pain is a real thing and it can be invisible. And it's not just that person you're living with. There's actually quite a lot of people out there living with various conditions under the chronic pain kind of umbrella. And I think that's really the aim of Pain Awareness Month, is to deepen that understanding and just get the word out there of all the conditions that fall under chronic pain. So Maya, I'm going to hand you over now to speak a little bit about the trials. And as I say, Maya is the CEO and co-founder of Find Me Cure. Thanks, Maya.
Thank you, Pedro, for this kind introduction. And I was thinking while you were saying that it's so often that people tell you that you look well, but actually you're the only one to know what's happening in your life, how you feel today and the other day. And actually, it was a similar situation with my sister a couple of years ago. She had a different condition. It was not related to pain, but it was again something that you don't see on the outside. She had a severe eating disorder, and so she was fighting that for a lot of years, and it was a real nightmare for her and for my family. That was one of the reasons why one day I started looking for all the alternatives out there because she didn't have anything that would work on her. And so this is how I learned that clinical trials might be an option and might be one option that could really work. With her, I was really lucky because I found a clinical trial that tests yoga for people having bulimia and anorexia. And so this really helped her a lot and changed her life. And actually, this really changed the way I see clinical trials, the way I see medical progress, my perception. But I also decided that I want to continue fighting for other people as well who are looking for an alternative of their treatment or even looking for a treatment, something that can improve their lifestyle or even save their lifestyle. And so this is how I started Find Me Cure and also FindMeCure Foundation, where we're trying to bring awareness around clinical trials. And I will actually, today, I'm going to speak not only about the clinical trial, not only about the benefits, but also what are the risks. Because I believe that every one of us deserves to know what are all the things on the table before making an informed decision on something so important as our health. So I'll start briefly with what clinical trial is, um, because I think that a lot of people have misconceptions around that. So first of all, as I explained with my sister, um, the clinical trial was actually testing yoga treatment. So as you can see, there are a lot of things that can be tested in a clinical trial and then proved to, as a standard treatment or new treatment. Basically, a clinical trial is the process for bringing a new therapy, drug, medical device, or whatever you can imagine to the market with like a medical label. I give this example very often that even this Fitbit on my head or on my hand, um, basically even if they want to advertise themselves as a tool for preventing diabetes, they need to run a clinical trial to prove that. So everything that's around us and have medical labels have been proven first in a clinical trial. And only through clinical trials we've been able to receive and to see the progress of medicine. That's extremely regulated. This is one of the reasons why clinical trials are taking so much time. And I'll just give you an idea of the drug development process, and not only drug development, as I said, it's also medical devices, therapy, surgeries, etc. So basically, let's take an example with a new molecule. Usually, from a new molecule uh, to be released on the market, it takes around 20-25 years. Clinical trials alone, they take around 6 to 10, 12 years, and that's a lot of time while people are waiting for something like better. That's true. But at the same time, let's make sure that the new treatment is not only safe, but it's better than what's already existing. So this is just briefly how this drug development works, and I'll go through the different phases of a clinical trial. Understanding the phases of a clinical trial is probably one of the first things you need to understand before making the decision whether to participate in a clinical trial or not. Why? Because the later the phases, the more advanced the research is. Advanced in terms of the more, I mean, more proven the new treatment or drug is on the market. So I'll give you a brief description of what the different phases stand for. For example, so I'll go back to the previous slide. Uh, Before bringing the new drug or medical device in clinical trials, you do a lot of research and testing in a lab. So you do everything possible so that you prove that the new compound, for example, is safe enough so that you can test it on humans as well. And when clinical trials are basically the first time when the new compound is introduced to humans. And at phase one, the main goal of phase one is to basically prove that the new compound is safe enough for humans, and also to test the different types of doses, basically. Also to see what would be the side effects of the new compound. So very often, phase one is run with only healthy volunteers. These might be students or all kinds of people who decide that they want to participate in these clinical trials phase one. They often get paid for that, and they're fine with basically testing the new compound. Only in some clinical trials. I'll give you an example with oncology clinical trials. Only in oncology clinical trials and some like really rare disease clinical trials, you test the new compound on people actually having the condition. This is by regulation. And this regulation actually is not something local, it's on an international level. All the regulations in the clinical research space are coming from international instances and institutions. So the local ones are just translation of the international ones. Going back to the phases of the clinical trial, 33% of the studies, actually 70% of the studies who were at phase one go to the next phase, phase two. This is where all the participants uh, are having the condition. And basically, the main goal of phase two is to assess the efficacy of the drug or the device. Is to really how much it would affect the condition of these people. A lot of people don't know that people being part of clinical trials are not getting paid. But actually, the reason for that is that these people should be there in the clinical trial to look for an actual improvement of their health, of their condition. And so people that get paid are only in phase one. Okay. Are invited to be paid only in phase one, where people in phase two, phase three, they're there for having the actual benefit of the new treatment or getting better. Um, phase phase three is even the next phase after it's proven that the new compound is working or the new medical device has benefits on the people having the condition. In phase three, basically, that's an international clinical trial already. Where in phase two, we have a couple of hundred people involved in the clinical trial in a couple of hospitals in several countries. Phase three clinical trial is a global clinical trial. It involves thousands of patients, hundreds of hospitals. And this is where basically the new compound, the new treatment, therapy, medical device is being compared to the standard treatment or to the previous treatment that have been proven to work on this condition. The idea is that after phase three, you have to prove that the new treatment is a lot better or somehow better compared to the previous one in several ways. Better treatment, less side effects, or just cheaper, basically providing cheaper treatment. So if there is any signal that in these three areas there is improvement, the regulatory bodies will approve the new treatment. Phase four is basically the post-marketing phase. That literally means that the new drug, the new therapy, medical device is already on the market, and doctors are allowed to publicly provide this treatment to everyone else. With that, I hope that this made sense. And if you have any questions around that, just let me know after the webinar, or you can just send your questions to Deidre now. I just want to continue with what are the actual benefits of being a part of a clinical trial. And I would love to hear more from Allison as well, because she went through the decision whether she would like to participate in a clinical trial or not. Generally speaking, the biggest benefit of being a part of a clinical trial is that you receive access to a new treatment that is not yet on the market and might not be on the market in the next like 2, 3, 5 years or even more. I told you that once phase three is finished, then the drug or the device is already on the market. But actually, to be on the market, it takes another 2 years from phase three to phase four. So you see that there is a lot of waiting. So by being a part of a clinical trial, you receive this treatment even before that. Usually this treatment is received for free, so you don't have any additional expenses. Only sometimes there are some additional expenses for some like procedures that you have to go through. But basically, the medical staff that is running the clinical trial, they will have to warn you upfront, so you will know upfront what it will cost you for you to be a part of the clinical trial. Generally speaking, it's absolutely free of charge. Everything's included. On top of that, the clinical trial, the sponsors of clinical trials, they might be universities, it might be pharma companies, it might be governmental institutions. They tend to cover traveling expenses, sometimes some kind of like daily expenses if you have to spend your day in the hospital, for example. Definitely big benefit is the extra care and better healthcare service, because by being a part of a clinical trial, there is a dedicated team to follow up on your progress, on your status. How do you feel? Do you observe something specific? Their job is to make sure that you get better as soon as possible, because this would prove the effect of the new treatment so much faster and so much more efficient. And also on top of that, they're the ones to be reliable for your health, for your safety, etc. So following you up and your health is their key job. It's not actually, last but not least, are two benefits. First of all, You contribute to science because by being a part of a clinical trial, you make sure that people know a lot more about your condition, about the way that the new molecule, the new compound is working on this type of condition. And also, you know your disease better, especially when the clinical trial is over. Now it's a regulation that they are supposed to share the results. You don't know your own like personal results, but you see the results of the overall clinical trial. Of course, you can track your own health and you can see the benefits on your health while being in a clinical trial. But basically, this really helps you understand yourself better, how you can manage your condition better, and of course, you contribute to other people's health. Be aware that very often the new compounds are not like breakthrough. Um, they are like, for example, most of the clinical trials are testing a new molecule that is similar to a molecule that's helping another, might be close condition or just another condition. Um, there are a lot of cases, for example, where there is a treatment on the market, a drug on the market for rheumatoid arthritis, and it's working pretty well with patients. But in order to prove that it's working on patients having psoriasis arthritis, for example, the sponsors have to run the clinical trial once again with psoriasis patients having psoriasis arthritis. So this means this treatment has been through clinical trials and testing a lot. They know that there is a positive. They just have to prove it. It's working on other types of conditions. So that might be the chance as well. And all this information, actually, you can receive very early on in the process. And I'll explain from now where you can get this information from. And I said, I'm not going to speak only about the benefits because certainly there are risks in the clinical trial as well. There are two main risks, especially in phase 3. There are these control groups. I mentioned already that the main goal of the phase 3 clinical trial is to compare the standard treatment to the new treatment, right? So you want to make sure that you have at least two control groups, and you can see what the results are of the first control group with the previous standard treatment compared to the new treatment, the control group that has access to the new treatment. See their results, compare, and then decide whether it's a lot better or not. Sometimes the placebo is just a sugar pill, as we know it. Sometimes it's the best proven standard treatment on the market. This is something that you will know upfront. You will also know what would be the chance of you getting the placebo because, for example, in some cases, it's just 25%. There are 4 control groups. Or there might be only 2 groups, so it's 50-50 whether you have the new treatment or the standard treatment or something else. So these are things that you know from. What you won't know, though, is that you won't know which control group you're at. You're not supposed to know, are you getting the placebo or the new treatment? Because otherwise, this might affect the way you feel. You might expect certain results, and they might basically mislead the scientists, basically. And not only the scientists, but yourself as well. Another risk of the clinical trial is that the new treatment is just not working on you. There are a lot of cases where people got a lot better in the clinical trial, but just some people don't get better. And sometimes there is explanation for that, and sometimes there isn't. But the news is that usually, not usually, but every time basically, if this doesn't work, they'll tell you, and you can always go back to standard treatment. Also, a lot of the clinical trials, they have these eligibility criteria, basically criteria that you need to comply with so that you can be a part of the clinical trial. And very often, they tell you that you shouldn't have like concrete therapies or drugs prior the clinical trial, and then in order for you to be a part of this clinical trial. And if that's the case, you can always try the new one or always go back to your previous therapy. As I said, the clinical trial is a chance for you to have access to this new therapy. Drug treatment, therapy, whatever this is. Then the question is, how do I get access to a clinical trial, or at least how can I actually understand about a clinical trial? Traditionally, the best way for accessing a clinical trial is through your own doctor. If your own doctor is involved in a clinical trial, he or she will come back to you and he'll tell you, well, you know what, there is a clinical trial. I think you're a good candidate. Would you like to learn more? And that's really the ideal situation. Unfortunately, only few percent, like really few percent of people, doctors, are also investigators, which means that only few of them are also a part of clinical trials. And very often, our doctors, especially GPs, have no idea what kind of clinical trials are out there. So they can't come back to you and tell you this, give you this as an alternative because they don't know that this exists. If, for example, your doctor is a part of a hospital that's running clinical trials, very often the big medical centers are a part of these clinical trials, especially in the big cities, then they might know something from their colleagues, and or you can go and check with your hospital what kind of clinical trials there are. But very often, even if there are clinical trials there, even if your doctor is a part of a clinical trial, it doesn't mean that you will be a good fit for this clinical trial in terms of eligibility criteria. And very often, these doctors or the hospital won't know whether there are other clinical trials that are better fit for you in terms of eligibility criteria again. So the next source for clinical trial information are definitely the governmental registries. In different countries, there is different access to clinical trial information. One of them is clinicaltrials.gov. In the UK, for example, is Clinical Trial Gateway, which is a lot better version than clinicaltrials.gov. There are registries in Germany as well, in other countries as well. Not in all countries there is such a register. Basically, to be honest, I'm not sure whether there is a register in Ireland. I hope there is. One of the big issues with these registries, though, is that professionals running clinical trials, they're supposed to submit documents to the regulatory bodies. And this is actually these type of documents, not all of them, but some of them that are approved for publicly available information are the ones that you see on the registry, which means that this is the really specific literature, very specific language used in the clinical research industry. On top of that, very often these documents are not up to date. And so even if you have details there or information, whether they're recruiting patients or not, it is not up to date. But again, it's a source where you can see more than just one clinical trial. And then you can start and hustle to find out more about the clinical trial. Something that I wanted to also share about this registry, and they're constantly trying to improve that. But as I said, because clinical research professionals are just sending their documents to the regulators, they're just not created for the normal people like we are. And so that's one of the reasons why we created FindMeCure. Actually, FindMeCure is a platform that unites different clinical trial registers in one. We have over 95% of all clinical trials. The idea is that we want to connect the right patients to the right clinical trial. We believe that when you're looking for a clinical trial, this is when you need the most help, and you want to have all the information that is something that you understand. At the end of the day, information is not only to see data, but also something that makes sense to you. So we've structured, we've not only created this database of clinical trials, but we've also structured the data so it makes a little bit more sense to patients and their doctors as well. And then what we've built on top of that is like a way to rank these clinical trials so that you can find the most relevant ones, and then a way to volunteer for clinical trials through the platform. my colleagues, they're helping patients to understand better the eligibility criteria. And we also have doctors that say, well, actually, you might be fit for this clinical trial, or actually, this might not be a really good idea for you, for your case. And of course, our goal is to connect you to the clinical trial team. They are the ones the final ones to run all the examinations that they need in order to say, well, yes, this is a fit for you or not, and yes, you can participate. And this is all the information around the new treatment, around the placebo, around your rights, etc., etc. Daniela is from FindMeCure Foundation. She's working closely with data and other and the international lines of patient organizations to spread word about this type of platform. Basically, what you see in front of you is like a widget. It's integrated into website. Give me a second because my colleague tells me that the sound.
We can't actually hear you, Maya. I don't know if you can hear us now. Your screen is reloading there. Hi, Maya.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's much
Uh,
clearer actually. That's great. Thank you, Maya.
Great, great. So yes, I was explaining that this is already on like several websites, on several patient organizations, actually a lot of them already. Chronic Pain Ireland, we're helping each other to spread the word about clinical trials. What's really important is that we help every single patient that goes through the whole process. And in the end of the day, it's about giving you all the options so that you or your closed ones can make the final call on whether that's something for them or not. So whatever we can support, we're there for you. I would like to show you how this works, but we tested my sharing screen and it didn't work out. So what I would love to ask you is, go to the Chronic Pain Ireland website after this webinar and just try to type in your condition, your age and gender, and this would actually provide you a list of clinical trials that are closest to you. Basically, it's a list starting with the closest hospitals, and also not only closest hospitals, but the clinical trials that are most advanced as well. It's like an algorithm that takes a lot of criteria into consideration so that we rank these clinical trials from the most relevant ones to the least relevant ones on the bottom. After that, you can review all the clinical trials there, or some of them, see more information about that, and decide to apply or not. Application doesn't mean that you will participate in the clinical trial. It means that we can review your application and connect you with the team running this clinical trial without you hustling or doing anything else. That's what it means. Yes, so I wanted to share with you that one of the difficulties with chronic pain is that this wasn't like an official approved condition. I think now it is, but still with clinical trials, sometimes it's really hard to, clinical trials on chronic pain, I mean, it's really hard to find a clinical trial when you just type in chronic pain. There are definitely, but the best results you'll get if you have a certain condition, for example, and then look something that's condition related to chronic and chronic pain, basically. That would be more precise when you look for clinical trials. And if you need more help, just let us know. There is a live chat as well on our website. How does it work? How do you start participating in a clinical trial? Well, first, of course, you understand about the clinical trial. You get in touch with the clinical trial team. If it's your doctor, then it would be your doctor basically running the next few steps. The screening visit means that that's basically the first time when you discuss this clinical trial. You signed off an informed consent. That's an official document explaining everything about the clinical trial, explaining your rights. It's a very important document, and I will go through some details in the next slide about the informed consent because this is really important. Once you sign off this informed consent, you go through the screening process, which means you do some examinations to determine whether you're really in a good shape, or you're fit for this clinical trial. If you're not, you can't participate. If there are some laboratory tests that say, well, at the moment you have high levels of glucose, for example, probably you need to do the same examinations a couple of weeks later, for example. Some clinical trials allow that, others don't. So the doctor should inform you about that. And if you feel that you're under stress, there are examinations looking at this kind of hormones, you might decide to run this screening visit later. And after the doctor confirms that you are eligible for this clinical trial, then this randomization control groups follows. It's absolutely randomized. Most often, even the doctors don't know which group, control group you're at. This means that the clinical trial is double-blinded. If it's single-blinded, that means that only the patients that don't know which clinical control group they're at, but the doctor knows. Everything's so regulated and so managed so that the safety of the patients is absolutely ensured. But also the actual treatment is well covered as well. I mean, the benefits for the health are also there. And I said that I will cover a little bit more about the informed consent. This is a really huge document. In many cases, it's like 100 pages sometimes. It's including some like scientific, some scientific information about the treatment provided in the clinical trial. It gives you information about the purpose, the duration of the research, the schedule of the clinical research, because what I mean by saying schedule, very often you need to have a certain number of visits in the hospital during the clinical trial. It might be once a month, it might be two times a week. It depends really on the clinical trial. This is a part of the patient's responsibilities, and you have to comply with that. Otherwise, you can't continue being a part of the clinical trial. It gives you like all the risks and expected benefits described in a scientific way as well. I mean, it's amended to the patient so you can understand it, but everything's basically there. Even like what's the chance of getting like a different type of condition. It's similar to what you read in the packages, like drug packages, like side effects expected, and all kinds of risks. Basically, they are by regulations. They have to put even like risks that might happen in 0.0001% of the population. They have to add it there. Also, you will receive information about the compensation of the patients. Is there like traveling expenses covered? Are there any other compensations? Also, you understand about the insurance, what kind of insurance is covered. Usually, actually every time there is an insurance. In very few cases, there isn't such. And these are only the cases where the company can say 100% that the new treatment has no risks at all. And this is very often when this molecule was used for another condition. People are using that on a daily basis, and this is just to prove that it's working on a new condition. That's just one example. And of course, what would be the type of drug and what would be the type of different placebos? Actually, the different control groups. What would be the placebo-like, etc. What would be your expectation? You have all the time in the world to take your informed consent. Go back home. Go back to your doctor, friends, colleagues, whatever, and just review all the documentation and ask questions. And actually, please go back to the clinical trial team and ask them every single thing that you don't understand, because that's really important. In the end of the day, this is the document that gives you all the information about your like future expectations and what can happen in all the different situations. Also, one really important thing is, I don't have a slide for your rights in a clinical trial, but one of the most important things, and it's also covered in informed consent, is that you can decide not to participate at any point without saying any reason. It's just one day you decide, I no longer want to be a part of this clinical trial, and that's it. However, I would argue that this might be, in some cases, that would be a good decision, but in many cases, I've learned from the patients that have been through FindMeCure, and not only, many patients do that when they see the effect of the new treatment and they decide, okay, I no longer need that. But in reality, once they stop the new treatment, they might go back to the previous situation. So the best thing is, if you're okay, if there is nothing like serious that you're concerned, if it doesn't really damage your lifestyle or something like that in terms of schedule of the clinical trial, just try to be a part of the clinical trial till the final end, because actually this would be important in order for you to have access to this treatment even after that. Yeah, I wanted to share with you one of a recent successful clinical trial. It's for people having migraines. It was approved in 2018 by one of the pharmaceutical companies, and it showed that it can reduce 50% of the migraine days that people have. And this clinical trial has proved this. It was assessed in more than 3,000 patients. So that's just one example how a clinical trial can help such a really like damaging condition, because I mean it's damaging a lot of people out there. Now it's already on the market thanks to the 3,000 patients who went through that, and I'm happy to know that they're so much better now. One really big question is what happens after patients' participation in a clinical trial. I would love to hear more about Allison's experience. I can give you some scenarios. When reviewing the informed consent, you can also receive information in the document what you should expect after the clinical trial has finished. Usually, finishing the clinical trial doesn't mean that the whole thing has finished. It depends on the phase, of course, but let's say if it's phase 2, that means that there will be phase 3, for example, and then different types of people will be a part of this clinical trial. In most cases, there is a clause saying that, for example, you will have free access to the new treatment in the next 48 36 months or something like that. Basically, they calculate how much more time they will have to spend in clinical trials until the new drug or therapy medical device is on the market. And this is how they decide how much longer you will have free access to the treatment. There are cases where this is not the case, so where you don't have access to this treatment, but in these cases, most probably it's because the purpose of the clinical trial is to prove that it actually cures the condition. So if it's supposed for you to be cured during the clinical trial, you aren't supposed to have any treatment after that. What you definitely receive after your participation in a clinical trial is support by the clinical trial team even afterwards. You won't go there regularly as once a month, but every other month or every 3 to 6 months, you can go there for a visit, and basically they will check you how you're doing, are you improving, etc., etc. So yes, once again, it's included in informed consent, and it's a really important piece of information. And with that, I really finished my presentation. I hope it was helpful to you, and I'm looking forward to receiving your questions. This is a really broad area, but I'm really keen to learn and to listen more from Allison, because she can give her own experience.
Thanks so much, Maya. I hope everybody can hear us again still. Very informative there. It's very difficult to squeeze in so much information into such a little amount of time. The question so far is just really access to the slides and that afterwards, which we can arrange. And I'll remind everyone that it is being recorded also. And once the recording is finalized, we can then share it through our social media and websites and get that out to people as well. So, Alison, if you'd like to join us there, I can see you're in audio, but if you want to join us in video too, that's great. And Alison, I know you're really going to discuss about how it is you heard about a clinical trial and what was it like getting involved and going from there. We will also share information, Chronic Pain Ireland will share information about CRPS and some links to sites that can give more information to people that maybe aren't as familiar with the condition. Okay, Alison, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, yes, I'm Allison. I recently been diagnosed with CRPS about 2 years ago, but I would say I started to get sick quite a bit sooner. Started a lot in my eye pain after that concussion in 2013 with complex regional pain syndrome. Most of it onsets after traumatic injury, although some does. There are some cases where it does onset, it's just spontaneous. And so for me, it was kind of like the traumatic injury and then spread to my right arm where I had a traumatic break, my left leg where I had traumatic injury as well. So it was very hard for me initially with getting a non-diagnosed illness. You get a lot of feelings of hopelessness and frustration. Doctors are very focused on, we got to get a patient in, we got to get them out. It's not an easy, you have a cold, you have a broken bone, they'll pass you to especially with a unique and rare disease like complex pain syndrome. There's not very many specialists that are like, yes, this is what I know, and I know exactly like a treatment to follow. So once we did get diagnosed, there was some relief for myself. At least to have a name for what's going on, and I can keep, hopefully there's treatment, hopefully there's a cure. Sorry, I'm fading out. I hope you can hear me. Sorry about that, April. But unfortunately, found out with complex regional pain syndrome that there really isn't a course of treatment like if you had cancer or fibromyalgia, and there is definitely not a cure. So that's where I turned to a lot of different treatments. I tried a lot of different medications that were off label, and a lot of this was me doing my own personal research. And I do come from a scientific background. I have a degree in genetics. I've done pharmaceutical research. I currently do stem cell research. So I did a lot of research on, what would work best with my disease, what wouldn't. So just being able to talk openly, I think with my doctor's help and bring up, what treatments I think will work. And unfortunately, with these rare diseases, there's not a lot of information and resources out there for them. And so that's why I personally decided to start a blog. I can post it when we post the webinar to give you some information and some treatments that have worked, both alternative treatments like flotation therapy, essential oils, supplements, yoga, distraction, prayers, meditation, acupuncture, chiropractic, everything I could do before we tried more invasive radiofrequency ablations and nerve blocks and ultimately like lidocaine infusions through a port every week. So with all this, I ended up getting a pretty big support system. I have a pretty big family, and I'm very thankful that my aunt was able to, my Aunt Sue had actually found online this clinical trial for me. So for me, I didn't really have to go through clinicaltrial.gov initially. It was more so my family was trying to help me out, like try this treatment, try that treatment. But she ended up finding this clinical trial on neurodronic acid that was only approved in Italy currently, and that the FDA was, and different groups were doing trials through the FDA here in the US. And so for me, I did a lot of research on it prior, because you hear about for every disease, and not just complex regional pain syndrome, and not just rare diseases, even the cold, you hear, hey, use a neti pot, use, just drink this concoction and everything will be better. So I really wanted to be informed before I started sticking infusions, 6-hour infusions in my body of some drug that we didn't really know enough about yet. So that's where the clinicaltrial.gov site came in. And as Daniela and others have described, it is very difficult to navigate. It is very scientific, and it has it's not written in layman's terms, and it can't be. It really can't, because it has to have all your benefits. It has to have all your research in there. It has to have who your primary investigators are, what sites they're going to be at, your full history, your full conducted experiment. And so it's very hard for patients to navigate and even find, your exact disease. I mean, complex regional pain syndrome is listed in there, but there's many other diseases that are not listed in there because they're too rare. And so you'll have to go to other and just go through, and it's very time consuming. And that's why I think FindMeCure is going to, having looked through that site, is amazing. Not only do they help you, like, hey, I have complex regional pain syndrome, I need something to help cure me, or at least give me treatment. They're able to help you and kind of be that middleman. And they know, day in, day out, they're working with not just in the US, the clinicaltrial.gov site, but, the sites in Ireland and the different UK sites. And they know them better than the layman person. So, but with my clinical trial personally, back to that, on clinicaltrial.gov, I was able to finally read through all the paperwork and figure out, neurodronic acid had about 5 or 6 trials going on, and figure out which ones were open, which ones were not, and which ones are accepting patients, and which were close enough to where I lived. And we ended up still having to drive over 100 miles. At first, it was every 4 days, and then it ended up now being 11 visits in a year. So we're still doing the follow-ups. But to get in, I called everybody, all the PIs, all the contact information, and then ended up emailing to leave a paper trail to show that, actually followed up with you, and I could go back and say it instead of having just like a voicemail ignored. And knowing the pre-screen questions, which are on the clinicaltrial.gov site, I was able to include those in my email so they could already show that I am pre-screened and I do qualify for this trial. So I felt like that was very helpful. It took me 4 months of constantly nagging all the PIs on this huge list of clinical trials for this clinical trial until I finally got contacted that I was accepted, and then the trial closed for me. But fortunately for me, it opened up later, a couple months later, down in Chicago, so you're able to drive. One as we had talked about, there are benefits and there are definitely drawbacks with clinical trials. For me, my clinical trial was a phase 3, so I felt more confident that it was safer. It was already tried in 2 phases, and my trial, they were looking at dosing and efficacy, so to make sure it worked rather than, like toxicity or something a little more, I would say, would put me on edge. You do get reimbursed for most of your trials. It's not a lot at all by any means, and you're taking off of a lot of work, which I think made it difficult. And definitely for people who are already, you get stretched thin with clinical trial or just being sick. It does stretch you thin. For mine, I was reimbursed $75 a day. So that's definitely not the same as what I would make working a day or having to take the day off because of the side effects from my clinical trial. Um, and then in addition, a lot of them reimburse for travel, which is a huge blessing. However, you can rack up thousands of dollars in just gas and hotels because you can't get back home or you're too sick to drive back home from your clinical trial drug. And you're not getting that check in the first month or two. For us, it took about 6 months to get that check back. So it can be a significant chunk of money. And for me, my clinical trial was initially it was very disappointing. I felt very hopeless and frustrated, and that I wasted all this time. And it was a very painful drug because it was a 6-hour infusion. And for those of you who are familiar with medications, the biophosphate, so it goes straight to your bones. So it's extremely painful. And so to me, initially, I regretted my decision. I cried every infusion after, and I wanted to quit. And I'm really thankful I did not. Because it started to eventually work I got my infusions in November 2017, and I started to see improvements about March 2018. And I would say now, in August here, I walk without a cane almost every day. Back before the trial, I would be wheelchair bound multiple days. I had a cane every single day. Now I'm able to do a lot of my hobbies, my daily functions, my housework, and so I think it is definitely worth it. And I get updates from the manufacturer of my clinical trial drug when they do release to continue indefinitely as they keep ensuring the safety. And just, with the follow-ups there, making sure that I'm where I'm supposed to be. My calcium hasn't dropped too low, and when it has, they have been there to infuse me with more calcium and hold up that end of the bargain. So I think, initially I went there just for the medication, but the follow-ups are definitely something you need to follow through with clinical trials because they do have side effects and they'll know how to treat you and they will take care of you. Whereas if you just walk into an ER, they're not going to know what's going on.
So it sounds like the process continued, Alison, even when the actual trial itself was over. They're still collating all the data on side effects, or as you were saying, with calcium levels, what the impact actually has.
Yes.
I'm sure I speak for lots of people when I say it's really good to hear what it's actually like participating in the trial, in that the sort of practical side of things like that of, you know, the expenses and just even that you may be too ill even to travel and just the day-to-day impact of participating in the trial. And I think you were really honest when you said in the beginning that I wasn't really sure about this. Is this the right thing for me? So I take it that view has changed at this point.
Yes. Initially, like I said, after every infusion, we'd go back to the hotel and I would cry to my husband that I'm not going back. I'm never doing this again. I'm a dying skeleton. Like I'm not going to do this. I can't do this anymore. This is worse than CRPS, which is the most painful condition known to the medical community. But in hindsight, like it was a huge blessing, and they still follow up with me, and they're still going to follow up with me as it continues. This is kind of like a lifelong process. They don't, I feel like, manufacturers of these drugs, they don't just, hey, let me inject you something and drop you. Like they are caring for your health. And when something did go wrong with me, I touched the calcium. They were like, okay, blood work came back. We need to take care of you before you seize or go unconscious. Like it is great to know that like they are putting patients they are caring about patients.
That's great to hear of an actual case. I mean, especially not having participated in a trial myself, and it's difficult to find somebody who has, because especially if the trial is ongoing, you can't really comment on the process. So to be able to hear that not only was it a positive experience overall, but it's made a significant impact, the actual treatment itself, like not having to use a chair or walk with a cane. There's a huge difference.
Yes, and I won't say it's like I'm completely cured or I'm better. Not at all. Like I still have pain flare-ups. I still have days where I need my cane or I'm in pain and I can't move. But I was at the point where literally I was bedbound too at one point for 4 months and nothing was working. Like this, it has improved my life and I don't expect a cure, but any sort of treatment that can get you from not being able to get out of bed or being in a wheelchair to being able to now work. I work 8-hour days now again, and I'm able to go out with friends. I'm able to enjoy time with my husband and walk my dog. And, I'm able to clean my own house. Like, who, who takes that as a blessing? But until you can't do it, you do. So
It's the
it do
little
make a
things.
difference. And
Yeah. And
I do want to caution though that even with this trial, I've talked to people and it hasn't worked this way with everybody. And everybody sees completely different results. Not everyone sees that, like, the complete re such recovery as I did. And some people see even more, like one participant is back playing university soccer. Like,
right.
that's crazy. And she had CRPS in her legs. And
Okay.
and then some people, it doesn't seem to work with their body chemistry. It's kind of
Hmm.
a hit and miss.
It's
And it's just,
individual.
yes,
Yeah.
but clinical
Yeah.
trials can give you hope. And, we're
That's
going in the
it.
right direction.
That's great, Alison, and I hate to interrupt you there at the end. We're just conscious of time. I just
Yes,
want to
yes.
put out the call if there are any questions. I know none have really come through. It was just in relation to the sound. But if Maya, you have any questions on what Alison was discussing there. I mean, we're just over the hour at this point, but if we'd like to wrap up, and I'll leave a minute there if anybody in the chat box wants to add a question, please do.
I'm going to put my blog too in there. I have more on my clinical trial experience there. And if anyone wants questions about my clinical trial, they're able to contact me as well.
That's great,
Yeah, and
Alison. Thanks for that. We'll all check out your blog.
yeah, I'll definitely check your blog as well, Alison. And it was really inspiring. One thing that I wanted to share with you is that very often people, I mean, these are cases that I know from working with patients that went through FindMeCure. Very often, I'm sorry, can you hear me now better?
Yeah, we can
Yes,
hear you
you
better now.
did.
Thanks, Maya.
Yeah, I have to change my headset, I guess. Anyway, very often people that go through Find Me Cure, they do that as a last resort. Basically, clinical trial is the last hope they have. But actually, sometimes it should be like not the opposite, but basically, you should try and see the clinical trials, at least know what clinical trials there are out there before going through all the possible treatments, because some of the treatments that you will go through might prevent you of being a part of a really promising clinical trial. So just be aware of what the clinical trials are around you, and then make your decision whether it's a clinical trial or something else.
Yeah, so as you're saying, Maya, it's really part of a whole process. Some people it can be at the beginning, but often people leave it to the very end.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's definitely true. There was exclusion criteria for my trial as well, that if I had had certain procedures that I could not be accepted because they could not eliminate that variable.
Mhm.
Yeah, so just make sure
Well,
that you know how
ladies,
the clinical trials really prompt. And if we can help you, Alison, Deidre, and I, we're open for questions and to support you in everything that can really support you.
absolutely. And social media and obviously webinars like this can really make such a difference in that people can watch it back in their own time. I know from last time it was maybe next week, perhaps it'll take a few days just for us to get it together, and then we post the link to everybody and to the attendees so you can see the slides. You can watch the webinar over again because it is a lot of information to take in within 1 hour. So I'm keeping an
Yes.
eye on the chat box there, and I don't actually see any questions. So you obviously spoke very clearly, and nobody is confused about anything in relation to that. I know just on Twitter we've added a link to just an article with the printable worksheet as well on complex regional pain syndrome we we were talking about that condition this time. We don't want anybody else with other conditions to be turned off the idea of a clinical trial because, as you say, Maya, it's for many different conditions, and that's all searchable either through Find Me Cure or even the widget on the Chronic Pain Ireland website as well.
Yes.
Mhm. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so thanks, Maya. Thanks, Alison. We're going to finish up now, so thanks very much.
Have
Sounds
a lovely rest
great.
of the day, everyone. Bye.
You as well.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Everyone.
Bye.